I never thought I'd be recording a podcast side by side with a Damon.
What about side by side with a friend?
I could do that.
Stupid. It's two stupid people.
Welcome to Your Inner Child is an Idiot, the podcast where we look back on things from our childhood, or early adulthood in this case, and see if they were any good. My name's CJ.
And my name's Damon. Hello.
2003?
Yes.
Lord of the
before
Rings.
John Kerry took the White House.
Lord of the Rings, Return of the King.
Yeah. Not to
Coming
be confused with The Revenge of the Sith.
Okay, so just to recap, everybody, we're recording all of these intros for the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy before
We haven't
we've
seen
rewatched
a stitch of them.
Before we've rewatched any of them. So we're just going to be carrying memories into these. I was in college.
Memories into these.
Whatever. Shut up.
I'm
It's a
imagining
thing.
the women with baskets on their heads.
It's a thing people say. And
Hold on. You are saying under oath that people say carrying memories into things. That's something people say.
I'm saying that I say it, and it's better if we just let it go. That's what I'm saying.
You are people.
I am people. Lots of people are saying it. Lots of people are coming up to me and they're saying, "Sir, I'm carrying lots of memories into this moment."
And they're
do
big,
with
tough guys, and they're crying. Their tears are streaming down their face, and they're saying to me, "Sir, I'm carrying these memories into your rallies."
I was in college, and I was in a long-distance relationship.
Ooh. I don't know why I treated that like salacious.
And she was coming to visit, and her plane was supposed to land on the evening that we went to see this movie. The movie was much longer than I realized, even though I had seen the first two. This one, I think, is the longest one, isn't it?
I don't know if it actually is, but I think its ending makes it feel really long.
Right. It has several falling actions.
Mm-hmm. The denouement, it's like the end of a log flume ride. Where you're just,
yeah. And I think it was not just that, but also I think her flight landed a little early, and I was just really excited to see her, and it had been a long time, like it had been several months. So I just could not focus on the end of this movie the first time I saw it. I just remember being like, I'm just going to go. She
came by to visit, and you immediately went to go see Return of the King? I don't want to get into any unsavory details.
No. She wasn't here yet.
Oh, okay.
We decided to go. I think my friends wanted to go. I imagine we went with some of our mutual friends, but I don't remember who all was there. But I remember I was probably like, I'll just wait because my girlfriend's coming in. But then they were like, oh, come on, we're just going to go and then you'll be done. You know what I mean? It was one of those things. Not that they peer pressured me into it because I wanted to see the movie. But I was like, yeah, we'll sneak it in.
No one's accusing you of anything.
Listen, my friends forced me to go see this. They shoved Mike and Ike's and popcorn down my throat. They made me read the Silmarillion before I could enter the theater. And I feel like I win just because I said the Silmarillion without repeating myself. So
you did great.
Without stuttering. Anyway, so I remember being very distracted and being like, okay, I think that's a good ending. We got to the we're doing it again. Okay, I see. Oh, and then they're on the bed. Okay, that's nice. Oh, we're weeping. Oh, okay, we're just looking at each other very fondly. Okay, and now we're going off to Magic Elfland. Okay. I just remember being like, okay. I mean, it's a well-earned ending in the sense that they've been through a lot as characters, but we probably could. I know they did cut some of the denouement from the books. I remember there's more like epilogue or something, right?
There's actually, I mean, it's part of the main narrative, but I mean, I can talk about this now, but when you're reading a book, you're actually holding a fucking thing.
Please explain to me how books work.
But when Frodo drops the ring into Mount Doom, you realize, why am I still holding 150 pages in my right hand?
There's so many pages left.
So you sort of have a much keener awareness, a tangible awareness that there is more to this story that's coming that you do not get in a movie. And I saw this movie probably also like the other two 3 times in the theaters, and each time you can just feel a palpable tension building in the audience every time a new scene begins after the ring has been destroyed, where it's like, okay, that same like emotion of like, you can hear like the seats creaking as people just get comfortable again. And like, I think after like Frodo goes into the Grey Havens on that boat in like the second to last scene, like you see a boat going towards the horizon, which in any fucking movie would be like, and that is the end of the movie. And when it cuts back to Sam, it's like a 45-second scene, but it cuts back to Samwise Gamgee back in Hobbiton going to see his family. There was an audible like in the audience when I saw it. So you're not alone. But yes, there's a whole scene where they go back to the Shire, and Saruman has actually taken over the Shire, and they sort of rally the hobbits to flush out these evil people, and Saruman gets stabbed in the back on the steps out of Bag End. And it's actually one of my favorite moments in the book. But it's also understandable why it constantly gets cut. Out of both the Return of the King adaptation that Rankin Bass did and this adaptation, both times they're like, absolutely not. People are going to kill us if we keep making film strips to go on after this. They wanted to see this fucking ring destroyed. We gave it to them. Let's wrap this up as cleanly as we can.
Yeah. And
get in, get out. That's what I always say. Quote Peter Jackson.
I feel like this is going to be a moment where we finally... So what I haven't mentioned in any of these intros yet is that Lauren is already angry with me for choosing to watch these movies for the podcast.
I feel like we gave her a 2-year head start knowing that it was coming sooner.
We've been wanting to do this for a long time. Damon really loves these. I think they're worth a revisit. They're old enough where, yes, of course, we weren't actually children when we watched
it. They're 20 years. This year.
20 years.
The Fellowship of the Ring came out this year.
It's 20 years. Time. We've been wanting to do it. And Lauren is already building in frustration at me as if I created these films.
At this point, do you regret telling her that there were monsters in every other room of the house and she has to live in the living room?
No, you can go anywhere else.
We've even got TVs in other rooms.
Yeah, I can watch these alone on my iPad. That's fine. But no, I think this might be a moment where I think she will check out well before this, of course, in the other previous movies. But this may be a moment that if she's watching, might break her.
I can almost guarantee it. Dollars to donuts, my friend.
And I understand, like, it's a frustrating moment. Like it's almost filmed like a joke. Like the slow-mo bouncing on the bed scene. It's like so ridiculous that you're like, it's like a Tenacious D music video. Like they're like, they film it as if it's a music video where they're being sexy, but obviously it's a joke. Mm-hmm. And like, this is like, they're all in white and like robes and like jumping. What is
There's a lot
happening
of Vaseline
right
on
now?
The lens. There's a slow motion laugh from Gandalf. There's an odd sexual energy. There's an odd sexual energy between both Aragorn and the Hobbits and Legolas. It's quite possibly the worst scene in a good film. In all of filmdom, in my opinion. It's so awkwardly handled, and it evokes the exact wrong emotion at that point. And I know what they were going for, which is like, they've been, Frodo had sort of resigned himself that he was about to die with Sam, and he wakes up in a bed, and he sees a person he thought was dead 2 movies ago.
Right.
And it just... I think if they had filmed it in just regular motion, it would have been fine. But the fact that it is in slow motion, it is... And this is all from memory. We haven't even fucking watched the movie yet. But this is both tattooed in our brains.
Seared into the memory. Yeah.
It's such just the wrong choice.
Especially at the end. Okay, so obviously, as you mentioned, like the characters have been through so much. And so this is like this great relief. And, there's, evil has been vanquished from Middle Earth, and our friends are back, and a lot of us, more of us, survived than we thought, and blah blah blah. And then also as audience members, we have made it through 10 plus hours of movie. And not that that's the same, but we have been with these characters.
It's like we've seen our own War of the Ring in a way.
Yeah, and we made it through this, and like this is supposed to be your like party at the end of the world, right? This is your scene at the end of Dirty Dancing where everybody, even the dickhead owner of the club, is dancing with the guy. You know what I mean? Like it's supposed to be like, oh, everybody's cool, and you're supposed to kind of like let your hair down, let your worries, like you made it, and instead you're like creeped out. It's the exact opposite of what you're supposed to feel, even though at first you're like, oh, okay, and then you're just like, what? It just slowly makes your head cock to the side as you go, what are they doing?
It's a weird moment,
and it's sad because that's what I remember from this whole, not even just this movie, but from that's the most that I remember is this scene from the whole trilogy.
It's awkward. I think this might
Which is not fair, which I don't think is fair. It's just that's the way it is.
I'm curious to see. I have a feeling that this movie might be the one that ages the worst. I feel like there's a lot of overindulgence in like slow motion and things like that where it can be a little bit overwhelming. I don't think it makes it a bad movie, but I think especially now that we have a few more Peter Jackson movies and a few more indulgent Middle-earth Peter Jackson movies,
right?
That sometimes that colors my opinion now of
this one.
Of this one a little bit.
Right, yeah.
Once I've seen his overindulgence in the Hobbit movies.
Yeah.
That this one sort of gets colored by that a little bit. I think it's still good, and I think there's a lot of like fun, like cathartic moments. I think I've talked on this podcast before where I love moments. Some people hate it, but I love moments in movie theaters where people clap at movies, even though it's so stupid because, of course, Peter Jackson and the actors are not there. It is a filmed event that's just being broadcast in the movie theater.
Little known fact, Elijah Wood goes to every screening of these movies.
He's just hoping that a Rocky Horror type like stage production will just break out in front of the screen, that he's always there in costume waiting in the wings.
He likes to do a DJ set after each one.
But I love when I saw this the first time when Barad-dûr like starts crumbling, people started spontaneously clapping, and it always warms my heart when people do that. I don't know why, but I love it. And I remember that.
I kind of like it too, to be honest.
And it's a pretty cool like destruction. When his eye blows up, it blows the rest of it sideways. It's great. It's great.
Yeah, and you get that like in the movie theater.
Plus you get Éowyn's "I am no man," and she stabs a Witch King through the face with her sword. And I remember that getting cheers in the theater. Plus, you get Legolas stabbing a giant elephant in the skull, and Gimli screaming that only counts as one. And you're in my favorite line, which is Legolas and Gimli solidifying their friendship and saying a very long pronounced I can do that.
Just a little inside baseball here for the listeners. Damon and I still, to this day, will text versions of that to each other with a lot of ellipses and then finally I can do that. And it's still very funny to me.
Makes me laugh every time.
Many, many years later.
Maybe not if I'm like watching the ellipses pour in from you and I'm just waiting them out so that they'll stop.
Sometimes we commit to it for a pretty long time.
Oh, yeah. Once you get that copy and paste rhythm going, you can go on for days.
And if I'm on iMessage on my computer, watch out, because it's a lot.
God help you.
I think I'm going to save them for after we watch the movies, but I think I'm going to have a lot of questions about people's powers, because they're very confusing to someone who hasn't read the books or have any idea what's going on when you come into these movies. Because like, well, if Gandalf was so powerful, is he only powerful because he died? Is he just wearing new clothes, or does that come with new power? If that lady could do that, why didn't she do that before? If they could do that then, why didn't you know what I mean? There's all those kind of questions. And I don't remember specifically those questions now, but I know I'm going to have them, and I can't wait to lay them on you and have you go, I don't know.
I don't know. I never read the Silmarillion.
Yeah.
No, I look forward to that. I would be happy to answer any questions you might have about Gandalf's costume changes.
We're going to get nerdy.
And related powers. His costume-related powers.
He feels so much more confident in white, so he can do a lot more.
He got invited to P. Diddy's white party, and he had to rush out to the Forest of Fangorn right after.
That'll give anybody a boost, you know? We're going to get real nerdy up in this piece.
I'm excited.
Watch The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King with us. We'll be right back. Damon, we've been rapping about fantasy for a little while. Let me tell you what the real fantasy is. The real fantasy that you get to live every day is a podcast of two buddies talking about old films and TVs that you can support at patreon.com/your inner child is an idiot.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry. I think the second person is throwing me off. I do live in this fantasy where I'm in a podcast where I talk about movies with my buddy, but I'm not also supporting my own podcast. That sort of defeats the purpose.
The fantasy has become a reality.
Wow. It is the power of fiction.
The power of Patreon. patreon.com/your inner child is an idiot. It's hard to come up with commercials, you guys.
You're doing great, and I'm not helpful in any way.
We are back. We watched Loader Rotor, as I like to call this one. Lord of the Rings, Return of the Ring. Ring. I just like to call it Loader Rotor. It doesn't really help with the actual abbreviation, but
you might actually accidentally lead people to the wrong movie. Have you ever thought of that?
Is this I'm looking for a rotor something?
Looking for Loader Rotor?
Loader Rotor, Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. I'm ready to recap. Are you ready for this?
Oh, yeah. I'm ready to go.
I'm going to stretch here. Okay.
Do some toe touches, some
gotta bring it home.
Bends.
Bring it home. Well, actually, could you recap where we were at the end of last movie real quick?
Oh, on the previous episode of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Well, Frodo and Sam had winded their way into Ithilien outside of Mordor, met up with Faramir, former Sean Bean's brother, who let them go on a treacherous path that Gollum was leading them on. Meanwhile, our buds over in Rohan had just driven back Saruman's Uruks from Helm's Deep and were enjoying a well-earned respite from battle.
Our buddy Pippin, the idiot of the group, finds Saruman's crystal ball thing that leads Sauron. Apparently, it has some sort of similar connection to Sauron, so he sees you with the crystal ball thing. Meanwhile, Gollum leads Sam and Frodo to the Spider's Cave. He frames Sam, convincing Frodo to get rid of him, and Frodo goes alone in the Spider Cave. Bad move. You never want to go in a giant spider cave alone. Meanwhile,
the rule of a giant snake cave, opposite. You want to go alone.
Yeah.
Because single file. It's meaningless.
Yeah. Frodo gets butt stung by the giant spider, but eventually saved by Sam, and he gets him out of there. Meanwhile, Elrond reforges the sword of Shma. Boromir's dad nearly fucks everything up.
Yeah, that family's a mess.
There's a giant, huge battle, even bigger than the one at Helm's Deep at Minas Tirith, which is the White Castle. You can get steamy hamburgers and orc battles. Good guys.
Both have a lot of onions, though.
Yeah. A surprisingly weird amount of onions. Also, don't describe your burgers as steamy and expect me to be into it.
Is the bun wet? I've never had a White Castle. At least not sober.
Eventually, the good guys prevail with help from the slow-moving cavalry of Rohan. They decide to attack Mordor head-on. They're like, let's take this fucking battle to Sauron himself. We're going to die, but let's just fucking do this. And that distraction actually allows Frodo and Sam to sneak up the back way, sneak and sally through the alley, as I like to say, and they destroy the ring. Gandalf and Frodo go to heaven, and everyone else gets to go fuck themselves.
Including the audience that's like itching in their seats.
And that was the Lord of the Rings. Sauron was the Lord of the Rings? Who is the Lord of the Rings?
That's the twist. The Lord of the Rings was in us all.
Frodo?
Also, it was Sauron.
Oh, Sauron. Okay. He's trying to be the Lord of the Rings, but it's kind of not working.
I think it's only in the movie once that Gandalf refers to.
Yeah.
There's only one Lord of the Rings, and he does not share power.
This might have been covered, so I apologize. But are the other rings gone? What happened to the other rings?
No, it's in Grey Havens when they're on the boat to heaven, which sounds ludicrous, but is accurate. You see that Galadriel has the 3 elven rings, which were made before Sauron ever crafted his one ring. She has one. Okay. And Elrond has one. And I don't know what happened to the third elf who had one, but he gave it to Gandalf in the end.
No, that's nice.
So Gandalf has the third one.
Wow.
In fact, when he says, I am a servant of a secret fire, when he talks to the Balrog, he's referring to his ring, which is the Ring of Fire.
Oh. Why didn't they play that? This is a perfect opportunity.
Couldn't get the rights. Johnny Cash's estate it's just loaded, but such a spendthrift.
He's more of a sci-fi guy. He didn't really want to.
Also, quite litigious.
I'm a hard sci-fi guy. Don't give me this fantasy crap.
I'm even strict about the Star Wars stuff because that's fantasy. There's knights, there's princesses.
It's really more of a space western. It's a space western.
Let me tell you, we are nailing this Johnny Cash impression.
It's exactly what he sounds like. Hello? I like sci-fi.
Folsom Prison loves sci-fi too, and they just let out a huge cheer.
So wait, okay. But there are more rings than that, right?
Yeah, there are 7 dwarf rings. Part of them are lost, but I think Thorin, who is in The Hobbit, the head of the dwarves in The Hobbit, his father had one of the dwarf rings, I believe, and the 9 men ones were all owned by men who became Nazgul.
Okay.
And now I don't know if you caught it, but did you catch where where Sauron's ring was?
In his eyeball?
It was on Frodo's neck the entire time. I don't know if you caught it. There were a few subtle references. It was just dangling by a necklace, and then they threw it in the volcano. Did you catch that?
Did they even show that ring?
I don't. You gotta catch fleeting glimpses of it. The fans know. The fans catch it. Yeah, the fans will see it.
It's a little fan service for you.
But if you get the Snyder cut, there's more ring in it.
So I'm gonna have a lot of questions because we're kind of wrapping this up. It actually
get them while they're hot.
I got to be honest, and the last 3 episodes may betray this, but I feel like these movies explain themselves better than I remembered. I was expecting to be more confused, but if you're paying attention, maybe I just wasn't paying as much attention. But if you're like watching them and like going like, what happened to that guy? You always like. It does mostly explain what happened to that guy. You just kind of have to like not get too hung up on the names, which I know is way worse than the books. But even in the movies, it's a little bit like, okay, I'm not that guy. Okay, fine.
As long as you have a vague description of the guy, you can sort of figure it out. I think. This is one of my larger points, but I think Peter Jackson does do a good job of knowing what to sort of gloss over and what needs to be explained, and I think he does a good job of that in general.
I will say that just up top, like most of my questions are clarifying in the sense that I'm interested, that the movie does a good job of making me sort of interested in more rather than I was confused about the action. You know what I mean? Which I think is good because you want, with a really rich world like this, you want something where you're like, hey, what was the deal with that guy? Not like, what the fuck was the deal with that guy? Like, where did he come? You know what I mean? There's like a big difference between I want this world enriched in my mind because it's so complex and interesting, and this made no fucking sense because you're just using nonsense words. You know what I mean? I think there's a huge difference.
If you'd like to learn more about Lord of the Rings, send a self-addressed stamped envelope to lordoftherings.gov. Why would you send it to a website? It doesn't make any sense.
So let me start with, this begins with a flashback that we don't super need, which is showing Smeagol, Andy Serkis, looking even creepier as just himself as Smeagol.
I actually prefer you as the emaciated creature than this sunken-eyed weirdo.
No offense to Andy Serkis, but offense.
He's got like the Eddie Vedder hair, and he looks like he hasn't slept, and his even just normal smiling Smeagol looks just like whatever the Middle Earth equivalent of a van would be, a windowless van.
Well, I guess that's just
probably that boat, that circular boat they were in the river.
that's what I wrote down. I feel like Smeagol might have always been a little murderous. It didn't seem like to take much to turn him.
He's like, you got a ring? I'm going to murder my friend.
Is he like, because it's like pretty clear he's a straight up Hobbit in this. Like, I know it's kind of inferred before that he was Hobbit-like or something. But
this scene in the books is pretty much at the beginning of the first novel. In the second chapter, Gandalf sort of just goes through the history of the ring, just sort of like Cate Blanchett does in the introduction of the film. Yeah. But they sort of hand-wave the Gollum stuff, which made me nervous the first time I saw it because she called him the creature Gollum. I'm like, he's the Hobbit of the Stourish strain from the Anduin River. But I am glad because each movie actually begins with a flashback, which is kind of cool. But this is the flashback I was most excited about. Although, I mean, rewatching it now, I was like, ooh, some of this is weird. I mean, the Andy Serkis part is weird. And then, but the worst part is the underwater effects of Deagle, his friend, getting pulled under by the fish are a little not good. It's it kind of has like a really cool Church's CGI version of Jonah and the Whale effect. And you can tell he's just sort of like in a room with fans blowing at him rather than actually being underwater. And the perspective is weird.
Let's rap about Christ.
Now, Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh. Let's rap. I don't know why it looked like that, but it was very awkward to watch now. Because most of the special effects pretty much hold up, but that was an exception.
I have to be honest, this one I noticed the most. I don't like want to spend too much time complaining about the effects of in a
20-year-old movie.
Yeah, but like part of what was really cool is the practical effects. So anytime they kind of get away from it and lean more heavily on the CG, it becomes a little bit more noticeable. Like especially later on in the third act, the big battle at Minas Tirith. There's a lot in that I kind of, again, it wasn't like. Some moments are a little distracting, but mostly it's just like I'm noticing this CG more than I did in the theater when I was, in my early 20s or whenever this would have been at this point.
There are a lot of, in that battle, there are a lot of shots that call attention to themselves, which is one of my little pet peeves where, the shot just could not exist in real life. It can only exist in a CGI environment. Shots where the camera is right behind guys who get blown up by a piece of debris or that one where you see the trebuchet send that boulder flying into the orcs and you follow it all the way down. They're kind of cool shots, but it also makes you feel like you're in a video game.
Right.
That's not the case in that whole battle, but there are just a lot of those type shots more than I remember in other parts of the trilogy.
Yeah, it had a very like ride at Universal Studios vibe. This is cool.
And stuff the DeLorean.
this experience is cool, but it doesn't have the same sort of, I don't know, practical vibe as some of the rest of it. But we also have pretty early on we have Britt. We got the appearance of Britt McKinsey.
Oh yeah, Britt McKinsey. Yeah. He that was a weird fan thing that happened where he apparently is at the Council of Elrond. And a girl noticed him in the background. Like, he is a background character. And a girl noticed him. And she made a whole, like, story for him. And he became, like, a fan favorite. And so then they gave him a speaking role in this movie. And then he also appears in the first Hobbit movie.
Mm-hmm. And
it's just a great triumph of a very attractive man who I believe whose father is also rich.
What's the deal? Okay. Another what's the deal situation. This sword, okay, the sword of Shmashma, as I call it. What is it called, actually?
Well, the broken sword is called Narsil, and the new sword is called Shmashma. Actually, I can't remember. It starts with an A, I think.
It gets a new name because it's put back together?
Yeah, the Library of Congress would tell you that you cannot just call it the same name. If you reforged it, it's a new sword.
It's a Ship of Theseus sort of thing. Like
you're going to have to fill out your W-1049 again for sword ownership. You still got to wait 5 days.
This originally has magical properties?
No, it's just literally the sword that cut the ring off of Sauron's hand in the beginning of it. But in the introduction, when they cut the ring off, that's the same sword.
So yeah, so he what's the guy, the human that was originally wielding the sword?
Isildur.
Okay, Isildur was wielding the sword Sauron shatters it, and he still uses it to slice the ring off of Sauron's finger.
Right.
And so then it just becomes like a relic. It's sort of a symbol of the broken line of the lineage. Yeah. But it doesn't, but when he reassembles it, it's like, hey, Aragorn's your king. See, he's got this sword that's put back together.
I think it's more, even though I think I get what you're saying, like, because he fights a ghost with it, correct?
Yeah, he also uses it to, I was getting to that. I was leading up to, he also fights a nebulous spirit with it.
I think that's more that it's a meaningful relic of the King of Gondor. It's sort of a sign of his lineage than magical in and of itself.
So potentially any sword that he was wielding might have done that.
If he had the shoes of Isildur and took them in, and he could just prove that they came, it's like a certificate of authenticity, essentially. If you have that at Antiques Roadshow, you'd get a better price for it.
But I mean, that means it does have. So I'm not really arguing against you at this point. I'm just sort of like a little confused by this because
I think it's a movie thing. The problem is, like, in the book, he has that sword the entire time. It's not a thing that he is given.
Okay.
He, like, the minute he meets Frodo and Sam, he's like, "Look at my broken sword," and they're like, "What a weird thing to do."
Okay.
Why would you carry a broken sword with you?
Is this a dick thing or?
And then when he actually goes through the paths of the dead in the book, they don't fight or even say anything. It's actually kind of creepy. They're walking through these paths and they just notice that behind them they are being followed by an army of dead people.
So they just are immediately fall in line.
They're just like, that's the King of Gondor, let's follow him. Now in the movie, as a rule, Peter Jackson's like, if there can be an action sequence, there will be an action sequence. And so he actually fights him. I wouldn't say that means the sword has magical power. At least the way I interpret it, it's just that it is the King of Gondor's sword, and that is the only person that can fulfill their oath. And so it's like a metaphorical power more than a literal magical power.
Okay. All right. I got it. And they're kind of like, but it's not really that convinces them. They kind of browbeat them into, he's saying, I'll release you from your vows if you fight. But also, like, Gimli's like, you have no honor. And then we
don't badmouth them in their own home.
And then we cut away, and then it's assumed that he basically passive aggressively got them into the battle.
Yeah. Yes, that's accurate. Any other questions about the dead people?
I mean, that whole dead city, it's very Ghostbusters, the whole vibe of it.
They're literally like green. Yeah, it has a Ghostbusters vibe. I think I saw the New York cabbie in there. That one scene, Slimer was there, but his mouth was full of hot dogs, so he couldn't really say anything.
The Scolari brothers
gave him the chair.
You have to look really closely, but they're in there. I'm not even necessarily complaining about that. It just had that vibe, and it was like, okay. It was very creepy.
Especially, I think that's why it's such a big scene in this, because, Peter Jackson comes from that horror lineage, and so he's like, there's a creepy thing in here, I will creep it up even more so. Although I would argue in the book, it's a little creepier, because they're just like, what are we doing? They're just walking through this path, and then all of a sudden they look behind them, and hello. They don't say hello.
Hi.
I'm the king of the dead.
Hey, kids. You
can see my skull through my skin. What can we do you for, King of Gondor?
Do you want me to haunt your enemies?
You're trying to defeat the Corsair ships. Why, gosh, we can help you with that.
What is it, Goofy now? Okay.
Yuck.
That's when he falls down the...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We haven't touched on any of my notes yet.
Yeah, go ahead. I feel like I have not.
I always just want questions.
Oh, okay, let's keep going here. Well, you touched on it. I wanted to talk about this anyway. That like, I feel like there's a lot of moments in this that are very suspenseful that kind of touch on that almost. It's not really. It's barely dipping into that horror genre, but the whole spider cave scene is real creepy. And you got this giant spider that's done pretty well.
Yeah.
The CG, I think, is awesome. And it, like, especially, if you give it context. And it's the moment where Frodo thinks he's out, and what is her name? Shelob? Shelob is like creeping silently above him. That's fucking awesome and terrifying.
That's Peter Jackson says he wanted her to have like a WWF moment. So she's basically like, to him, she's like crawling on
the steel cage,
the steel cage match sort of. So that's what inspired that. Yeah, he does did I tell you? I can't remember if I mentioned this in the introduction, but I took my friend when this was in theaters. She was going to see it, and she had severe arachnophobia.
Oh,
and I was like, this is the one. You know what's coming. And she's like, yeah. I know. She spent her time like tucked behind my shoulder for this entire scene. It's a really good spider.
It is. It's done really well. And much scarier than the ones in the Hobbit, the cartoon.
Oh, yeah, with the bunny spiders?
Yes.
He does a really good job of like, although, I mean, this isn't as fantastical a creature because it's just essentially a spider.
And also he's a hobbit, so it doesn't have to be as giant to be.
Yeah, she might be the size of a Volkswagen. I mean, that's still a big spider though.
Right. Yes, very big.
But he also like gives her enough care. Like she has like got this like sort of like tumored face, and she has a good amount of character to her where she just feels like a real thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad it doesn't talk. I feel like
hello.
Well,
name's Shelob.
Why is it all goofy?
It's Peter Jackson's cousin. It's the only voice he can do, and Peter promised him. He promised him.
He needed work. Okay, so who all has beacons? We like the beacons for like 20 minutes.
Fucking beacons. It's insane. I remember that I audibly laughed in the theater because it just kept going, and to the point. So in this story, I mean, Gondor calls for Rohan's aid, and they have there's mountains between them, so they have these beacons on top of the mountains. And, your job as beacon tender is to keep an eye out on the other beacons and then light your beacon if the beacon before you gets beaked. And it is like a 5-minute montage, and it's almost like Sideshow Bob and the Rakes, where it's funny, it's going. Not funny anymore, and then it's the most wondrous thing you've ever experienced. There's like a scene where there's a beacon on top of a mountain that's so tall that it's through the cloud cover, and I'm like, who would fucking see the beacon?
It's for the eagles flying over. Like,
true.
Okay,
we're here.
We're coming.
Oh, I see the beacon. Come here. Come here. You're the king of the eagles.
Flap, flap, flap. That's them flapping their wings.
While we're talking about things that maybe inadvertently made us laugh, should we get this out of the way?
Are you talking about Sloth from the Goonies?
No, we can talk about, you can call him Sloth. I prefer Krang. I'm talking about the bed scene.
Yeah.
In the denouement.
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. I think that's the first thing I thought of when we decided we were doing the Lord of the Rings. Okay, to set the scene, do you want to set the scene?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the ring has been destroyed.
It's an epilogue.
Right. Frodo and Sam sort of are on the slopes of Mount Doom, and they get rescued by Gandalf and the Eagles. And
take it easy.
Oh, no, let me die here. Don Henley, no. With your weird, raspy whisper voice.
Have you ever heard him speak, like, in an interview or something?
Don Henley?
Yeah, he has like the deepest fucking voice. It's insane. He's like, hey, I'm Don Henley. And then he's like, take it easy. It's like, what is happening? I don't even know how you do that.
So when they're picked up by the Eagles, Frodo wakes up in a bed in Minas Tirith, and he sees Gandalf at the food. What?
They're going to say Minnesota.
He wakes up in Minnesota. Amy Klobuchar is there. Disgraced Senator Al Franken is there. All your favorite Minnesotans. Captain Kangaroo, was he Minnesotan?
Prince was still alive when this was filmed. He was there.
Bob Dylan was there.
Yeah.
He said, call me Robert Zimmerman, though. Don't make a big deal out of it. If people find out I'm in Minnesota, they're going to, like, freak out.
You don't have to call me that at home.
So he wakes up in Minas Tirith, and he sees Gandalf at the foot of the bed. And now I'm just going to describe it as a normal scene. And he says, Gandalf, and Gandalf starts laughing, and they share a knowing laugh, and then all the fellowship comes in. But here's what makes it weird. It's a 3-minute scene entirely in slow motion. I actually break down what makes it so awkward. Can I go into that?
Please.
It's a 3-minute scene. It is filmed in slow. It's filmed in slow motion, but there's also dialogue in it. So then the dialogue has to be re-recorded because otherwise Elijah Wood would be saying Gandalf. So Elijah Wood re-records his dialogue, so he has to say it slowly. Gandalf, like he's like ESL learning Gandalf's name in English for the first time. And then on top of that, aside from Gandalf, the first people that come in are Merry and Pippin. They jump onto the bed.
Start tickling, kind of.
And I guess what I took it as is like they're telling their story. So like Pippin's like sort of reenacting some of his adventure. And then Gimli comes in looking, one might say, completely deranged. And then Legolas comes in, baby-faced with his formal dress blues on, and he gives like a weird knowing look. Like here's the thing though, this isn't this scene's fault. Every time Orlando Bloom has a scene where he looks at another person in the eyes, it is sexual. I don't know if I'm bringing it to the movie or if he's bringing it to the movie, but it is always sexual. I can cite at least 2 other occasions where it's weirdly sexual.
Let me weigh in on just that for a second,
please,
because like I said, I'm not. Orlando Bloom doesn't particularly do anything for me. He's bringing
your loss.
He's bringing it to the movie.
No, there is a weird thing.
It's the look.
I'm not particularly attracted to Orlando Bloom, but I am attracted to Legolas. It doesn't make any sense, but
Leggy,
it does not transfer. Leggy.
Yeah.
So then Aragorn comes in. He's chuckling, having a good time, and then slow
laugh is always creepy anyway. So everything just adds to it.
It's a bit of a Ganondorf moment where he's don't laugh like that. Then Sam comes in. He looks ashamed, and you don't know why.
He's just out of the shower. That's guaranteed because he's got the wet hair.
Yeah.
They had this makes sense. They had a rough adventure, and they were gross, and they needed to take a bath. Like,
absolutely.
I'm not sure why we had to know that.
Maybe Sam didn't know that everyone was going over to Frodo's room, so he's like, I'm just going to take a shower. And then, there's Faramir's outside, and he's like, they're all in Frodo's room. You got to get over there. And he's like, oh, shit, I got to put my tunic on. But then there's a weird technical aspect that makes this weird, is that, of course, they have to film the hobbits together in the scene, and then they film the people, the taller people, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gandalf.
Yeah.
So they're just standing around the bed, not interacting with anyone, watching Pippin and Merry fall all over themselves, reenacting their adventure, but they're not reacting to anything that's going on. They're just standing there laughing, looking blank-eyed into what I assume is nothing. It's so weird, and I have never experienced as big a misstep in a movie that is generally pretty good. This is a big, what were you thinking? Why is this scene here? And I don't want to pick on Peter Jackson. It's just this stumble that almost calls attention to itself because you've done perfectly fine, and then you fucked up the dismount. It's this very awkward scene.
It is so awkward, and it's so you know how they're if you're gonna make a mistake, make a big mistake. You know what I mean? They're if you're gonna fuck up, just commit to it, and you can use confidence to get through it. And it did not happen. He definitely tried that. He was I'm just gonna go for this. I have this idea, I have this vision in my head, because I want this to be, the hobbits, the rest of the fellowship, and through them, the audience have suffered so much. And I don't mean that these movies are bad. I just mean it's a very bad, a very long slog of an adventure, right? And we're to the end of it. And I think what he was trying to go for, not to speak for Peter Jackson, was just the sheer elation of everyone's, well, not everyone, but our friends here are okay. And we want to celebrate. We thought he was dead multiple times. We thought the entire world was going to be enveloped in evil, and we were all going to be, enslaved or killed. And we're so happy. And so he wanted to commit to that. It's he went for the grand finale fireworks, and it's that one thing that happened a few years ago where they all exploded on the ground. And you're it is impressive, but not in the way that you meant. It's impressively weird.
It's so the opposite emotion that is obviously being attempted. It's ludicrous. It's inappropriately hilarious.
It's so sexually charged too.
And it's oddly sexually charged. There's a lot of... they're grown men hopping on beds. That's also kind of weird. What is Sam ashamed of? Legolas, who did you fuck on the way here to meet your friend? Everyone's got a little secret in that scene. Everyone's got a little secret. Wait, I just want to talk about Legolas's fuck looks. He has another one in the Two Towers when Aragorn was separated from the group and he comes back and he looks Aragorn up and down. Then he says, "You look terrible." But he looks him up and down. I was like, I've seen that look before. But not in Helm's Deep, personally. And then there's in the coronation scene, Legolas comes up with the other group of elves, and he's at the front, and again in his formal dress blues, and he puts his arm on Aragorn's shoulder, and then he looks slyly over his right shoulder, and if you continue watching the scene as you would, why would you stop it here? He's talking. He's like, Arwen is right here. But it looks like, why don't you and I get out of this coronation?
Yeah, it looks like he's
find a little
nodding to
the Minas Tirith. It's such a fuck me face.
It really is. It really is. I think we're done with that scene, but I just it is worth this amount of time because for better, for worse, but I don't think I'm the only one who this is one of the main things I remember about the trilogy. I remember good battles. I remember being a lot of maybe too much Hobbit simpering. I remember Gollum. I remember the creepy dude with the teeth. He was not even that's not in the theatrical cut.
Who's the creepy dude with the teeth? Oh, the mouth of Sauron?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He wasn't in this, right?
No.
So that's just in the special extended edition.
Yeah. The EE.
Well, I remember that from when we watched it, then I guess. I don't even remember that from the theatrical cut. But I
remember as a nerd, I was like, oh, they're going to cut out the mouth of Sauron.
Yeah. And they did. And I remember this. Those are the main things I remember. And that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. I don't think it's something that pops into my head when I think of the trilogy, but it is something that pops in my head when it's it's time for, we've watched the other two, time for Return of the King. Oh, that bedroom scene.
Yeah. It's not important enough to sink the movie, but it is long enough to be like, boy, you're really committing to this miss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's weird because, a lot of the other scenes in the 20-minute denouement are effective in the same emotion. Like the "you bow to no one." I got hot eyes in my eyes, obviously, in my face, I guess I should say. Hot eyes in my face during the coronation scene. And even, Sam coming back from the Grey Havens and even the Grey Havens. Those are all scenes that work. This is just such a stumble.
Yeah.
All right, let's leave Peter Jackson alone. We're mean. It feels mean. He probably already knows. He's like, yes, I know.
Yeah. We've flagellated that scene enough, I think.
It's just such a weird thing.
I said here, I don't know what do you know what I'm talking about when I said Gandalf used his Nazgul spray bottle?
I think that's when he's riding out. He's riding out to save Faramir. Faramir's running back from Osgiliath, and the Nazgul are sort of chasing after him, and he uses a beam of light that comes from his staff. Right. And the Nazgul ah!
It was
very much
when
like
Tippy gets on the
couch.
Furniture. This was an important thing to note in my notes. The Gollum shows Frodo and Sam the back way. There's a set of quote unquote stairs.
Yes.
Which are not stairs. There are maybe stairs in that path, but it is definitely not stairs. It is climbing a mountain. You don't there are not stairs to the top of Mount Everest. There's a path.
Well, I think they are. They are cut in the book, at least they are cut into the mountain, but they stress me out in the book, in this movie. Apparently Sean Astin had a hard time with them. They are literally, it's a step and then a foot up. It's another cut. And you sort of have to pull yourself up. But it gives me anxiety every time I read it and every time I watch it.
There's a moment when Frodo chases Sam away because Gollum has framed him, said he ate all the food, And obviously, Frodo is not in his right mind, too, because of the ring. And
Because the ring.
Because of the ring. I don't know if you know this, but it's Sauron's ring.
Eagle-eyed viewers will catch that it's Sauron's ring.
So at one point, Sam stumbles down, and to say stumbles down the stairs really undersells it. He falls down several yards of mountainside.
You can see Minas Morgul, the dead city, underneath them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? There's even a scene where Frodo and Sam are asleep. And Frodo, I used to be a Cub Scout. Frodo's not maintaining a safe distance from the edge of that cliff. His half his cheek is off the edge of the cliff. Why would you sleep like that? It just doesn't make much sense.
I have this thing, and I don't think this is necessarily normal, but when I see people fall down a hill or a mountainside like this, it hurt. It physically pains me. I don't know what it is about that, because I don't like watching someone break an arm in a movie or whatever, but that doesn't I don't feel that. But for some reason, when I see people tumbling down roughly, it makes me have visceral pain, and that scene was ow.
Well, you've probably fallen down before.
Maybe it's the memory.
I think that's what the visceral memory of I've never been shot, so I can watch people just get gunned down in a action movie over and over and over again. But if someone breaks their hand or cuts their hand on a piece of glass, I'm like, ooh, this movie should be rated R.
When somebody hits their shin on a coffee table, I'm like, motherfuck. That's also when Sam finds the elven bread.
Oh yeah, the mystery's been solved. This crazy person who's been trying to drive everyone away may have actually been lying.
I'm sure I'm not the first person to notice this, but the ghosts also have a very haunted mansion at Disney World vibe to them, because sometimes you can see their face and sometimes it's skull. It's very 3D old
cool
school
effect where if he gets mad, you see his skull more, and if he's sharing tea with you, you see his face more.
He's a pretty chill ghost king.
Ooh, while we're sort of near the stairs, Minas Morgul, first off, has one of me and my brother's favorite lines, which is, that's that city where they see the army come marching out. No, that's the dead.
Oh, okay. Oh, these are
people.
Oh, this is a different city than that?
Yeah.
I thought that was the dead city.
No, Minas Morgul is where the Nazgul flies out and the armies come forth. It's right by the stairs when they start climbing up.
I thought that was the same city.
Oh, no.
Because it looks the same.
It's green.
It's green.
It's got the green stuff.
So why is that one green? Just because it's got the laser beam that goes straight to the
I think it's supposed to be more gross than anything. I think it's supposed to be white. It used to be the sister city of Minas Tirith. So it's supposed to look a little bit like that.
But it wasn't green it. I need to...
It looks like it's glowing.
Yeah,
green.
yeah, right.
I never thought that someone could mistake them. I'm not saying that you're wrong, but I think these movies, I'm always curious what they read to a person who doesn't know where these places are in relation to each other. So when they're there, that laser beam, first off, scared the shit out of me in the theater.
Yeah.
I remember the bass when it comes up is so loud. Also,
that's how you know they're having a sale, because they shoot them. 15% off, all because we're about to destroy the city. So come on in.
Nazgul talk. They're all from Brooklyn. So I remember that. I also, one of my favorite lines, me and my brother like to say this whenever we encounter someone we don't like. Gollum, when he sees the city for the first time, he says, it's full of enemies. And so me and my brother, whenever we would see a Republican convention, we'd say, it's full of enemies.
Who says that?
Gollum says that.
Oh, okay.
Enemies. It's full of enemies. He gives this weird pause, just really driving out the camp of, it's full of enemies. And speaking of, just in relation to that laser, I also remember that the sound effects of the fucking mace that the Witch King carries, I remember I could feel it in my chest in the theater. That it was so heavy that it made me so uncomfortable. Oh, this is also the introduction, or not the introduction, but we see the full evolution of Frode the Load here. pretty much becoming a complete waste of space. Pretty much he's a jewelry box, essentially, that you have to move across the plains.
Yeah.
This is one of my larger points, but I'll say it now. I think we talked last time that they had to change the Two Towers a lot because Two Towers book, Frodo and Sam's story actually ends with Shelob's lair and, Frodo being taken in by orcs and Sam realizing that Frodo, who he thought was dead, was actually alive. And so they move Shelob where she is chronologically where it actually happens in the books. She is like happening at the same time that Minas Tirith is being attacked. But you also, because they move it around to be chronologically accurate, you lose this whole, story of Frodo and Sam moving across Mordor together, which I think is, especially watching it this time, I thought was really weird because I think the last half of this movie is almost indecipherable as to what is happening. It just, people seem to be making decisions willy-nilly. Aragorn's like, I've got an idea. In order to buy Frodo some time, let's take every man we have and take it to the gates of Mordor to be surrounded by orcs and trolls so to divert attention away from Mordor. I'm like, but if you lose this battle, there won't be a civilization left to save because you'll all be dead.
Right.
I don't understand. And the extended edition explains it a little bit better, and the book, of course, explains it a lot more. But I'm like, why would this plan makes no sense.
It did seem like a last ditch to me. That's how I read it.
Right. I think that's what they're going for, but it seems like Gimli even states well, let him stay there. And I guess the idea of let's take all the power we have and hopefully, I hope that Frodo is in Mordor because this plan doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah, they have no confirmation. Although they did get a small amount of confirmation from Faramir. From Faramir that they were on their way because they had left them with Gollum. Yeah.
In the book, it's explained Aragorn takes the Palantir and sort of exposes himself to Sauron, which sort of forces Sauron to be more paranoid and
Is that the crystal ball?
The crystal ball. But then also on the Mordor half, you have this place that they've been talking about for the entire trilogy, and it feels like you're in it for 5 minutes because they're just all right, we just got to walk past these rocks and we're on the mountainside. Plus, Frodo goes from speaking coherent sentences when he comes out of the tower to waving at things in front of his face, over a course of 5 minutes. Whereas in the book, it's a lot more a slow progression of him just becoming more and more incoherent, just completely burdened by the ring. And then it's not that it's not clear. It's just so fast that there's no progression. Also, I think what you lose is that Sam gets a lot of heroic moments in this, but in the book, it becomes clear that Sam is the hero of the Lord of the Rings. He is pretty much directing, here's our strategy, here's how we're going to get there. You do this, I'm going to go search for water. He really takes the lead in it, and it's really it's really charming to me. Yeah. And I don't think you get that same effect. You get hints of it, but I feel it could have been stronger if they I don't think they have to be committed to, Shelob absolutely has to happen when Minas Tirith is happening. Just move her to the end of Two Towers, who cares?
Well, yeah, with the Sam thing, the sort of premise was broken a little bit in this, because the premise is Frodo has taken on this burden and no one else can do it. And Sam fucking pockets the ring for we don't know how long, because Frodo's out because he's been poisoned and and egg sacked by the spider.
In the book, he even wears the ring for a little bit to infiltrate into the tower.
Oh wow! So that's I'm not saying we don't really know whether Sam could have bore that burden for as long as Frodo did, but he does just fine and probably could have taken it the rest of the way to Mordor.
Frodo, why don't you go home?
Yeah. Why don't you find the fucking water while it's like a fresh set of legs, you know what I mean? Sometimes you got to tag in.
Yeah, it's like a relay.
Yeah.
That's just something, because I just finished the book a few days ago that struck me, is that the story, at least their half of the story, is really about Sam becoming the hero.
Right.
It kind of reminded me of Game of Thrones a little bit, but without someone being beheaded, where it's the person you thought was the hero is not the hero, and it's this other person.
Right.
I really liked that.
not to defend that too much.
I sort of turned into a fight. I really liked that.
That was a good thing.
It was really, really, really good.
I mean, it's also one of those yada yada story things where you're like, this is the way it has to be. And as an audience member, you just have to go, okay. Yeah. Like, it has to be Frodo. Because otherwise, you're just going to be like, why? Well, I mean, like...
Whatever you need, movie.
It's like, I don't know, because I'm writing this and you're reading it. Fuck you. It's the Rohan cavalry sure saunters into place when they arrive, don't they?
Oh, yeah. They know how to line up.
People are just being slaughtered. The good guys are losing, and the cavalry shows up and then just sort of poses on top of the mountain.
Well, you got to get your little hype going. You got to get a little bit of your song. You got to give Krang an opportunity to sort of get his people into place.
We also got, but that scene, this battle. So Lauren was half watching this while the whole trilogy while I'm watching, and she got up to like do some dishes or something, and so all she had was the audio, and once she noticed this, I couldn't help but notice. But all that is yelling because it's people charging into battle, and so they're just like ah, and then another person's like ah, and they're like ah, and she's like, what is happening? And then I'm like, now that you brought it up, I can't stop noticing it. And it's really funny. So we were just at our house watching this movie, shouting at each other across the kitchen. It was a lot of fun. I highly recommend it.
I think you were an hour ahead of me, so I also noticed because you texted me that was happening in your house, and then I noticed it during that Rohirrim speech.
I really liked King Theoden's, oh, brother, look when the Nazgul comes for him.
He's like, shit. I forgot.
He gives
I was so busy with the Oliphants, I forgot about the Nazgul. If I had a fucking nickel.
It's not funny because he dies.
Oh, yeah. He does have that face. I imagine it was the same face when the Titanic went down on his watch.
Does the Nazgul black hole implosion thing happen in the book?
Well, in the book he's described, he takes off his hood and he's literally just a crown floating above nothing with eyes. So it's eyes, a crown, otherwise no head.
Weird.
So she stabs into his head, his non-head, but I don't think he implodes. He just like the garb turns to dust, or the garb just like collapses. His clothes just are empty.
It just seems weird that like the magical creatures, like these, like, I mean, I guess they're just, I don't know, like she just stabs him in the head. There's nothing sort of magical about it. Like his death is magical, but it's just like, it's because no man can kill me. Is that why?
I mean, there's so much more to it, but it's all not covered really in the movie. So I think the movie would say, yeah, the prophecy was that no man could kill him, and she is no man.
Ah, okay. That's why she says,
I am no man. Which got cheers in my theater.
The juxtaposition of her, so they have her wearing this like pretty, it's like a little bit too big of a helmet for her. And so you literally just see her eyes and her mouth. You can't see her nose or like her brow. It's very funny because she keeps getting freaked out and you can see just her giant eyes. I liked it. It's very undercutting, but you know, obviously she's very brave and ends up killing a Nazgul. It's nice. But it's like also kind of funny at the same time.
It's I really like that scene.
By intention, I think. Yeah.
Right. I think that's again his like horror thing, because then she like gets her arm crushed by that fucking mace.
Ugh, yeah.
You want to be careful with those maces. Plus, although I have to hand it to her, she chopped off that fucking dinosaur's head with just like what? Yeah. 2 swipes? I can't cut through an onion because I don't sharpen my knives properly, but she's fucking cutting through a dinosaur's spinal column with a fucking paring knife.
That was pretty badass because that is a very scary, it's one of the scariest creatures in this series, I think, is the Nazgul dragon thing. It's called a Schmardum.
I don't think they give him, even Tolkien doesn't even really give him a name.
I remember we talked about this last time. They're the Sauron's evil answer to the eagles.
Yes.
The Eagles, we call them. And it's like really freaky and coming at her, and then she just slices it the fuck
She
up.
just dodges out of the way and cuts its head off.
Circumcision.
And it left her a little heart container. Banana.
What do you think of evil Frodo? So, right at the end, Frodo the Load, he says, I'm not fucking doing this. Gives the evilest face that Elijah Wood has made since The Good Son, and puts on the ring.
Wait, he was the good son in that one.
Was he?
Wow, you really made me think about the geopolitical ramifications of the good son.
When you think about it, aren't we all the bad son?
Aren't we all disappointing our fathers? Yes. Yeah, he gives a little bit of a coy, I'm going to fuck this all up look to Sam, who also has kind of a mirror of Theoden's fucking shit face.
Oh, boy.
I mean, I knew it was going to happen, but I knew it was going to happen. Yeah, very. And then he puts that ring on his index finger. Don't be weird. And then Gollum comes in. He's like, I know this song and dance. Let me just hop on the place 2 feet above the footprints and
bite where a finger would be.
Feel out for a hand. Find the finger.
It's pretty clever, actually. How did Gollum survive a fall down a steep cliff? Because Frodo chucks him off a cliff into darkness. It's far enough down that you cannot see.
A wrestling move where he just sort of kicks him off.
Yeah, just full on suplexes. Gollum.
I mean that. I guess I would argue that maybe Gollum has spent 600 years living in caves. Maybe he can he's learned enough of free solo climbing tricks that he can stop himself.
He's sort of like also powered almost more by the desire for the ring than his actual personhood, also hobbithood at that point.
Jetpacks.
Also, he has a hidden jetpack. I forgot to mention this when we were talking about it, but I have a quote from Lauren about the bed jumping scene. Oh my God, it gets so much sexier than I ever imagined. She's not wrong.
I have a line from the Paths of the Dead, not the City of the Dead, but the Paths of the Dead scene where Gimli says, you got to face it. We're going with you, laddie. And Aragorn gives this face, and it's like almost like a Sex and the City face where it's like, you guys, I do not deserve you as friends. No, I wanted to address one big thing, or two big things before I go anywhere else. Before I fucking leave. One is that while the extended edition does cover it, and I know there are people who are going to say, well, actually, it's in the extended edition. Any other day of the year, I'd be on your side. Well, actually, it's the extended edition, people. But today I am in the theatrical edition. It's not in there. And that is Saruman does not get an end to his story. It's so weird of a choice. We touched on that there is a huge epilogue that the movies cut out, and I can certainly understand why they do. And that is the end of Saruman's story in the books. Is he has taken over Bag End and essentially the Shire and gets stabbed in the back by Green Wormtongue. But in the extended edition, there is a scene at I was about to say Orthanc, which is its name, but I'll call it Isengard for the sake of clarity. At Isengard, where, Gandalf essentially says, hey, you fucked up. You're no longer a wizard. Get the fuck out of here. You're fired. Leave your keys. Yeah. Leave your keys at the point of sale and, don't come back here anymore. And they just cut it out. And they're just sort of like, Saruman's okay. You keep an eye on everything, Treebeard. Bye. It's so weird that you would not have... I mean, Sauron is your primary antagonist in the movies, but Saruman is actually a person who, walks around and actually seems threatening because he's not just a fucking eye on top of a tower.
Yeah.
Plus, you have, Christopher Lee playing him. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, just give him more screen time. Yeah. Or death
I don't know. It's just one of the more inexplicable choices in this, and it kind of is... because we talked about in the other two that I feel like the choices, the deleted scenes that are included in the extended editions in the other two, they're kind of for fans. And if you want more Lord of the Rings, here it is, but it's not important to the plot. And I feel like this one starts to be, it feels like the choices they cut are a little bit more cynical, because it feels like they actually are affecting the understanding of the plot and the conclusion to stories for certain characters. And I feel like it is one of the pieces of Lord of the Rings legacy that I kind of wince at, because I feel like now we are in an era where movies are released and then directors are like, well, actually, you need to read the manga that we also released with this. And if you've been following on our Twitter feed, you'll find out that actually Kylo Ren has a very important story that was going on during Rise of Skywalker that we didn't get a chance to go into. And if you'd like to buy a lot of subsidiary, art direction books, we could be happy to go into that. I'm like, if you aren't telling your story in the movie, you are not telling your story. Yeah. And I feel like this is the first one of the three where it feels like the cuts they made were to sell more extended edition DVDs.
Do you really think that's why they cut that out? Because I hear what you're saying, and now that you're saying it, I'm like, oh yeah, what did happen to him? Because I just sort of, because they kind of yada yada at the beginning of this movie of like, this, they have like the crystal ball thing.
They yada yada him in a way that if you were watching any other movie, you'd be like, keep an eye out. He's coming back. He's going to be like the blonde guy in Die Hard, where he's like covered in a sheet and he just pops out of nowhere.
That's true. I guess I saw it like he was such a big part of the first two movies, but he was like a mini boss, and we've moved beyond him. You don't think about what happened to Don Flamenco, or what's his name? You don't think about what happened.
Don Flamenco. That is correct. It is as offensive as you think it is.
I was trying to think of somebody from Punch-Out who wasn't offensive, and there isn't one.
Not an option, I'm afraid.
You don't think about
Joe.
Yeah, you don't think about Glass Joe once you pass him, right? You move on until you find him in the welterweight later, I guess.
So you're saying that Saruman, I wouldn't get a heart container, but I would get the hook shot once I defeated him.
Yes, yeah. When you're in his dungeon, you have to use the skills you learned in that dungeon.
Mm-hmm. And half of the dungeon will be inaccessible, and you're like, why can't I get to that one half of the dungeon? Then you fight Saruman, you get a hook shot, and you're like, boom, got it.
Despite being the kind of person who complains about the length of these movies, I felt like it moved pretty well for the most part. And I think part of it is because of the cynical cuts. Because they're like, I think honestly, they probably could have been more aggressive. Because it did move a couple of parts were slow, and of course there's the bed scene. You could have just cut most of that, but stuff like that is like cutting Saruman. I just didn't miss it. I would love to have seen more Christopher Lee, and I do remember, because I've watched the extended editions with you. It's been many years, so I don't remember what's in which version now, but I didn't feel like I missed anything.
I guess it just seems like he's
very important, but just not in this movie.
He's just such a big antagonist in the first two, and there's almost like a wishy-washiness about him in the third one. And I guess as a book fan, I'm like, it doesn't feel like this is a good conclusion for this character, because it leads you to believe like, oh, he's alive in the tower and he will escape. And then he'll have the conclusion he does in the books, which he also doesn't do. So it feels like this weird loose thread that I don't even feel, because in the extended edition, it happens in the beginning of the movie before, everything's ramped up, that it feels like an understandable place for it to be. I don't know. It just seems like an odd place that your secondary antagonist just does not get a good conclusion to his story, at least in my opinion.
Well,
the last thing I wanted to say was two quick notes about the coronation, is that the coronation really captures the awkwardness of someone starting to sing unprompted, which when Aragorn starts singing...
We get two examples of that.
Gets quiet. And then Aragorn and Arwen's kiss is actually surprisingly good, and is the first time that I felt that people in Middle-earth actually fucked.
Other than Legolas and anybody.
Well, of course. Anytime like anyone's in a room with Legolas, their grinder is just chirping at them, and they're like, Legolas, we're actually fighting a battle right now. The grinder joke for the queer people out there.
Okay, thanks.
Do you want to
definitely didn't get it, so
wouldn't even know what that app costs on the App Store if I wanted to get Grindr Extra. I don't even know what that would cost.
You want to transition to talking about the trilogy as a whole?
Yeah.
I'll do it. I'll sing a quick song. And we go to the trilogy as a whole.
Ooh, this coronation's running long. Maybe we can get a beer.
Gonna talk about all 3 movies.
Yeah, I just want an Americano. I didn't know it was open mic night. I just wanted to get an Americano. I guess I'll start with the one I've already showed my hand on. Is that I feel like this one. I think you disagree with me, but I feel like there is a little bit of a cynicism to this one in terms of some of the extras that got sort of kept for the extended edition, and that is a trend I really do not enjoy in big movies right now, where a movie. I mean, Rise of Skywalker, I started to get really annoyed by all the extra stuff that kept coming out.
Emperor's back. Remember that? What?
No, I mean after the movie came out, and they were like, "Oh, sorry, we didn't really go into Knights of Ren, so here's all their story stuff." I'm like, "Who cares now?" It's just it felt like every other week there was a new story about some clarification about the story of Star Wars. I'm like, no, you already failed at your chance of telling the story of this sequel trilogy. Stop bothering me with it. And I feel like I don't think that Marvel has necessarily fallen into this trap yet, although now is the only time where I have not been able to keep up with Marvel because I don't have Disney Plus. So I'm scared that once the movies really start getting back into full gear, it'll be like, that's a WandaVision reference, so you probably won't understand that if you didn't. Oh, you've not been watching Falcon and the Winter Soldier? Oh, sorry. Well, that really would make a lot more sense if you knew that part. There's already sort of a language in Marvel movies where I can tell that something's being referenced, even when I don't know what it is, and I can just turn to you and be like, why did they linger on that? What is that? And you'll be like, oh, well, in the Ultimate Spider-Man, they sort of go into how blah, blah, blah. I can't even fake the stuff that comes out of this.
Well, half the shit I don't remember. I'm not as good at because you actually are reading these books along with it. So it's a little different than my experience with comic books because I did read them, but I don't actively read them anymore.
Well, there's so many more now. They stopped making Lord. They said, we're done now. Thank you.
Right. But even the comics that the movies are based on, if it's based on loosely on a storyline or in Ultimate Spider-Man who did this, I probably didn't read that because I read for one, a lot of comic books for one 4-year period of time when I was a teenager. And then a little bit after that, but mostly not. And everything else has been Wikipedia just like you, and I don't
it feels like when a Marvel movie comes out, there's always at least one article that I stumble upon on Slate or something. And it's let's explain that post-credit sequence. Like we all need to be brought into the loop. And it always feels a little obnoxious.
When I think that whole experience can really cut both ways, and that goes for Lord of the Rings too, where just like we were talking about before, it can enrich your experience. It can just flesh out the world that I thought that was really interesting. I want to find out more about that, but it didn't really need to be in the movie. Mm-hmm. You get the gist of it without knowing who has the other rings. You know what I mean? That's just interesting thing to fill in, but it can really easily cut the other way where you're I don't understand why the motivations of this character because I don't know this background information because they cut it out of the movie because it was too long or because, it just wasn't an action scene or something like that. Why does Legolas want to get down with everyone he sees? Is there something behind his backstory that I don't know?
I mean, if you look like Legolas, wouldn't you?
I mean, of all Middle Earth, races, it seems like elves like to fuck the most.
Yeah, probably. I mean, they're all in the woods, just hanging out with their long hair, their beautiful skin. Why wouldn't they? Some of them look like Orlando Bloom. Some of them look like Liv Tyler. Some look like Hugo Weaving. In the Hobbit trilogy, we find out some of them look like Lee Pace.
At the and you see the elven engravings in some of their clothing and their artifacts, and it also just says DTF repeated.
It just has their stats and what they're into.
Oh, speaking of engraving, I just had to say, at one point you see the engraving on the sword of Shmesh, And I swear to God, it says I'm thinking Arby's. I saw it. I'm not going to go back. I'm not going to freeze frame it. I'm not going to promise anybody anything. But I think it might be, penises on the front of the Little Mermaid video cassette kind of thing. Somebody snuck it in there. Good mood food.
What if Elrond, when he was going to deliver the sword, he just wrote it? He didn't have any paper on him. And he's like, on the way back, I want to stop at Arby's.
I don't want to forget this.
I don't want to forget it. So I'm just going to, I got my little chisel here. I'm just going to sort of hammer it into the sword. Aragorn won't know the difference. He's never fucking seen this sword before.
Because I know by then I won't be thinking Arby's. So I got to remind myself.
Because its new name is Anduril, by the way. I looked it up while we were recording. Anduril is Narsil's new name.
Narsil becomes Anduril.
Exactly.
Sure.
Also known as Flame of the West.
Okay.
The other legacy I wanted to talk about, and I think this goes into like Peter Jackson's ability to tell this story because it can be really convoluted if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the first time I really noticed art direction in a real way, but I feel like the legacy, at least for movies as a whole, is that art direction can do like a huge lift in terms of like telling your story without having to like explain who begat who and, who lived here before. I mean, I think they really do a great job of like making places look unique.
Yeah. Right.
They do a great job of like being able to identify here is an elvish, place, and here's a dwarvish place, and here's a place of men really well. And I think that's just a sign of just great art direction. I think they get great silhouettes. I think of like Weathertop, which is where Frodo in the first movie gets stabbed on the hilltop by one of the Nazgul. And if you're a nerd like me, it was a former Númenorian outpost that also hosted a Palantir, like the crystal balls, as you like to call them. And if you know that history, you will see that they built it in a way that does like all these. It's like a circular room that is like a ruin. Yeah, it has this Stonehenge look, and there's a big platform where a Palantir would sit. But it doesn't have to like have Aragorn sit down and tell you all this. There's just like something that if you're not a smart fan, but if you're a fan, you can pick up on those things without having to have it like laid out for you. And I think that's the big legacy of these movies, or one of the big legacies of these movies, is just like how putting a lot of concentration into those type of touches can really like pay off dividends and make your world feel a lot more real without having to like go into, and in this year of the Shire Reckoning, this happened. I think it just does a really good job of knowing what to speak aloud and knowing what can be built into the sets and knowing what to just sort of toss completely. Even when I was playing like Breath of the Wild, I remember like in every other Zelda game, ceramic pot looks the same no matter where in Hyrule you are. But in Breath of the Wild, depending on what culture made it, it looks different. So like a Rito ceramic pot looks different than a Zora ceramic pot. And I was like, this feels Lord of the Ringsy to me.
Right. Yeah. They were like inside the world. They were like committed to. Yeah.
And it even can be like a preternatural thing where you don't even notice it, but it just makes it feel more real.
Right. Lived in. Do you want to go to the verdict?
You know what? I do.
I can't make you go to the verdict, but I can. No, I can't actually carry you.
No, you can, because I mean, if you just keep me here long enough, I'm in the verdict.
I'm just gonna.
We're in the verdict.
Okay, go ahead. Do you want to go do your verdict first?
I think I said in the introduction that this one might be the weakest of the three, and I think I still stand by that one. There are a lot of cuts that I've already sort of railed against. Having also just reread the book, I think the Scouring of the Shire, which is the epilogue that gets cut out, is underrated, and I think you could add it into a remade Lord of the Rings, but I think you'd have to hint at it a lot more throughout the story because it does come as a surprise. I just want to say that. I think it could be done. It gets cut out of every version of the story, but
what do you mean you could hint at it?
So like in the book, when they get back to the Shire, it's completely destroyed and it's been overrun by Saruman. He gloats, and he does it out of like pure pettiness. Like he's already been like ruined, his power has been taken from him, and just out of pure spite, he has like ruffian men like cut down all the trees in the Shire. Like pure dick move. You find out that throughout when the hobbits have been away, some of the this is so complicated. Anyway, they started trading with Isengard, and Isengard was only too eager to trade with them because they knew that the hobbits came from the Shire. So they eventually start sending ruffian men who eventually like take over the Shire from the hobbits and sort of create this little fiefdom. And then when Saruman like escapes Isengard, he goes there and hangs out and then has all these trees cut down and then just gets stabbed on the steps of Bag End. That being said, what I mean by hinting at it is that it comes as a surprise at the end of the story, which if you've been waiting for the ring to get destroyed, and then if you're watching a movie and then you're like, oh, and there's a whole new story beat, great.
Right.
I feel like if you could hint at it throughout the trilogy that things aren't as they should be in the Shire, like just a scene here and there, like throughout the trilogy, the audience would know, wait, there's still some thread hanging out there that we need to resolve.
You know when Gandalf visits Frodo in the beginning and he's like, can't fit in his house? That's all I'm picturing is Saruman like being like, hey, I took over this tiny hole that I can't fit in. You're like,
he's got like bruises all over his forehead.
Just get a house wherever, anywhere else.
No, I'm staying here for reasons.
He like digs little sunroofs in it just so he can get his little pointy wizard out through it.
I don't know. I think that the twist of The Return of the King is that Sam is the hero, and you also find out that Saruman is the real villain, because Saruman should have known better the entire time. This will all be cut out. I feel like I'm just rambling like a meth head. That being said, this movie's great. I think it's the weakest of the three, but I think it's still pretty good. I feel like, though, I would recommend that someone watch the extended edition rather than the theatrical edition, whereas the previous two, I would say you'd be fine watching the theatrical edition.
There's a couple jokes I missed from the extended edition that were pretty good.
Oh, like what jokes?
I just, I don't remember what they are. I just remember there's like moments that I can see why they cut, but that they were funny.
Is it like Legolas and Gimli getting drunk or having a drinking game?
Yes, like little character beats, which, like I said, I can see why they cut them, but I do they're pretty fun.
But Your Inner Child is not an idiot, is what I'm getting around to.
Whoa.
What? And by the way, let me just check the scoreboards here. That's Your Inner Child's not an idiot for Fellowship of the Ring. Your Inner Child's not an idiot for Two Towers. And Your Inner Child's not an idiot for Return of the King. And that all adds up to Your Inner Child's an idiot. Oh. I don't even know how that would work.
It's the like East a negative.
German judge. He's always tough on these things.
It's like a negative number. You multiply every other one. So it's 3. So this is really interesting. I agree with you that this is, in a vacuum by itself, like this movie is the weakest one, but it does give you a lot of payoff for the trilogy. Yeah. So I had some of my favorite moments in this movie because we get I feel like the big battle pays it off. The Shelob scene, the spider in the cave is really great. You get to just see sort of like the end of so many storylines, even though we're missing Saruman's, which I know irks you. There's there's some pretty cool battle things, and you get to see a Nazgul stabbed in the head. You get to see one of his dragons. These things have terrorized our heroes the whole movie, and you get to see them fucked up.
You get to see Sauron like explode.
Yeah, just crumble to the ground.
Turns into a pain prick, and then he.
Yeah, and that explosion kills all the orcs and stuff. It's a pretty good payoff. It's exactly what you want from the big bad dying at the end.
I think I said this in the introduction, but I remembered in the theater when that tower starts crumbling, and it starts crumbling really slowly. Yeah. People just started cheering like maniacally in my theater. Yeah. And
we talked about the obviously the epilogue bed miss, but generally speaking, like this whole trilogy, it could have easily gone very badly. I mean, he had a fuckload of money to work with because this was big budget at the time, like one of the biggest.
It was big budget, but it was a smaller budget than they thought you would. I mean, he did it on the cheap, whatever that means, for 3 giant blockbuster movies.
Well, and he filmed it all at once, which is really fairly unprecedented for a movie of this scale, at least. And you can tell that he loved the source material, that he really wanted, and I think that's not a guarantee that you're going to do a good job, but he cared so much for doing right by the story. He cared so much for doing right by the characters, and I think that's really important for something like this, because it could have easily, it definitely dipped its toe in cheesy moments and some misses. They're not perfect movies by any means, and there are a lot of, I still think there's, even in the theatrical cut, there's a lot of unnecessary flab that could be shut down. I'm not saying these all need to be 90-minute movies. I'm just saying we don't need to see that many furtive looks, to get the point across. Having said that, the sort of the tension and the sort of, it's easier to say this when you have 3 movies all at once to watch, in relative succession, because you get that sort of final, the release of the big battle of winning in the end, of our good guys winning, which is why I think it's really interesting, the idea of the scouring of the Shire, because that sort of undercuts that whole message, which I also think is fun. But this whole story is generally, the way it's told in this one, a bit more traditional. Like, good guys win, bad guys lose.
Right.
You are.
Well, what I like about the scouring of the Shire is that they come home and they find that their home has changed, but then they use the tools they have learned on the road, and they are able to rouse the hobbits against these men who have mistreated them, and drive them out quite easily. Right. It's this triumphant little note, and also kind of a thing of you can't just be isolationist all the time. Even if you ignore the outside world will come and get you anyway.
Right. I do think that the sort of symbolism metaphor of having not read the books, seems to be more present in the books, just from your explanation of comparing it to the World War stuff, is not super. It's not really in this version as much. There are not as many lessons, and I think that's because it's decontextualized over time, for one thing, and
there's not much to glean about a World War II metaphor for us, people in 2020.
Yeah, and it's a movie; it's not a book, so that's a different medium too. But I do miss that a little bit, and I kind of think we talked about this in the Hobbit episodes, is because there's a lot of the anti-war politics that I align with, so I kind of want to explore that a little bit just from my personal perspective. But they're fun-ass fantasy action movies. Your inner child is not an idiot.
Yeah.
It's great. It's really fun. And if you haven't seen these, I can't believe you're listening this long.
Yeah, because we gave a recap, but otherwise, we just sort of bopped all over.
Good for you, but would recommend. Good to explore. I'm interested. I'm not saying I'm gonna for sure, but I'm interested in reading the books. Just gonna throw that out there. What do you think, everybody? Your inner child is an idiot at gmail.com. You can text us or leave a message at 615-576-0525. I want to thank my friend Russ Weaver for the use of his song Top of Two for our ad music. We want to thank the patrons of our show, including Captain Jean-Luc Picard,
Karen Kurd,
Lindsey Nell,
Jonathan Day,
Just Cuz,
The Zesty,
my boy Jacob Grimm,
Particle Man,
Damon's Australian accent.
That was Irish almost.
Damon's Australian accent.
Heather Tuggle,
dramatically placed hot dog,
the supreme ruler of this podcast,
Larissa Maestro,
T. Smith,
Jeremy Powlen,
Kevin from Cleveland,
Brandon Hardy,
His Honor the Mayor,
Dan McIntyre,
and Justin Shea.
Thank you all very much. If you want to support the show like them, patreon.com/your inner child is an idiot. Do you want to sing us out with your Hobbit song at the?
Yeah, actually, I have my favorite Gollum song here.
Okay.
I like it because it has a rhyme scheme, and then until it doesn't.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Surprise.
Naughty little fly, why does he cry? Caught in a web, soon he'll be eaten.
That's good. That's good. You subvert the rhyme.
You don't catch it. You don't see it coming.
Is that from the book?
No, that's from the movie. He sings that when Frodo is trapped in Shelob's web.
Oh, I know, but is that,
I know, I don't think it is. That is, I think, might be an Andy Serkis original.
It might be a little too clever by half for Tolkien's song. It needs to be about 3 pages long.